Okay, perfect. So, should we start?
Yeah, sure, fine.
Yeah, I think my colleague sent you the question list yesterday to you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, actually, the first question I'm wondering, like, what was the original intention of making this film, and why do you choose to focus the story on the Wadden Sea?
Yeah. Well, first, something about the Wadden Sea. The Wadden Sea is a area close to the Netherlands, and it's one of the largest international intertidal areas in the world. It's also UNESCO protected, and it's a huge area, and it stretches from the Dutch coast to the German coast along to the Danish coast for about 500 kilometers of coastline. And it's a surface area of about 10,000 square kilometers. And it's a huge nature area, and it's a very important nature area. But what my fascination is that there are also people living, and the way that people are in their relation to nature. And the relation between man and nature is, as we understand, a fragile relation. And then my fascination, it goes back long time. When I was a young boy, I visited for summer holidays with my parents the islands, and then we went to the Dutch Wadden Sea Islands. And then it's an intertidal area, as I told you, so you have to deal with high water and low water. And what we did, we went out on the mud flats when it was low water, and then we created this fishing line with hooks on, and then we waited till it was high water and then low water again, and then we went back and to see what was there on the hooks, and we caught some fish. But my main fascination at that moment as a young boy was this constant tidal process. It kept on going and going and going, and sometimes there was 360 degrees water all around, and then a couple of hours later all the water had gone, and the only thing there was land and wet surfaces. And this was my main fascination. And when I became older, every time I went back to this area to experience this phenomenon of the tides. And for me, there was a sort of magic. How come? How is this tidal process influenced, and how does this tidal process appear? And then during the years, I started reading and studying about it, and we learned at school and university. And then the tides are influenced by the position of the moon and the sun. It has to do with Earth magnetism, and it's influenced from the cosmos to what happens on Earth. So this was my pure and main fascination many years later when I started making this film. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to capture the magic of this tidal process. I wanted to capture the magic of this area in a film. And I also wanted to do this in a special and different way. And I see this tidal process, this constant process of high water and low water, high water again, low water again. It goes on and on through the seasons, to the years, to the decennia, millennia, etc. I see this constant process as a breathing process, like a inhaling and exhaling process. So for me, there is a relation with human being and flora and fauna, as human being and flora and fauna. The vital motor behind our existence is breathing and is taking oxygen in and oxygen out. And that is not only for flora and fauna, but for human being as well. So this was for me the magic of the film. And then to tell it in a different way, I believe that a good film needs a soul. A good film needs some sort of magic which keeps you going as an audience. There should be something that you have constant the idea that you think you know what it's about, but then during the film it's different every time, and that keeps you going. And for me, the soul of the film is also the magic of a film. And then I started researching, and we started doing location scouts, and we started meeting people and doing more research into nature. And then we discovered that this tidal process, this breathing process, it's a cycle, and then you observe and you experience many cycles, like day and night, like the seasons, year in and year out, but also life and death of human being, life and death of flora, and life and death of uh, fauna. In wintertime, there is almost no light. Nothing happens. It's gray, it's dark, it's windy, and nothing really specific happens. And then in spring, the light comes out, things start growing, there becomes color, a lot of activities start, and at the end of the summer season and the autumn season, we go back to a sort of zero situation where we are back into a period that nothing happens. So this is also a cycle. And then you have the cycle of all the migration birds entering this huge area every year. Either they stay there for their winter time, or they breed over there. The young birds get older, learn flying, and migrate back to either Siberia or Africa. And the next season they're back. This is also a cycle. So all these cycles together were my different sort of subjects, and I try to interwove and to relate all these cycle sort of processes to each other. And that became the structure of my film. And then this tidal process, this breathing process, was, I believe, for me, the main character of the film. So this is something about the fascination and my personal fascination for this subject and the way I started creating this film. And then something about the way I try to tell a story. I do not like to use the average interviews. I do not like to use a voiceover. I believe in the purest form of cinematography. And I also started the idea of this film not to use any traditional composed music. I think about 99% of all films and documentary films use traditional composed music. And many times music is really beautiful to listen at, but I think composed music in a documentary film and also a feature film is manipulating the emotion of the viewer. And I don't want to manipulate too much. And on the other hand, I experienced that the real sounds in my area, the real sounds of my subject, like wind, like storm, like the murmuring sounds of small creatures in the mud flats, like all the sounds of the birds, like the huge impressive sounds we create as human beings with our industry. I believe all the original sounds are much more interesting than composed music. And I think if you watch a film with original sound, it makes you as an audience more aware of reality, more aware of what happens around you. And then something about the way I like to observe, the way I like to tell my story. This has to do with what I call radical observation. And I try to explain that. Change increases our awareness. If we are in the middle of the mud flats in the Wadden Sea, and there is no wind, and there is 360 degrees of horizon around us, then seemingly nothing happens. But then all of a sudden, you become aware of really small subtle changes, like a small ripple in the water somewhere over there, like the sound of a tiny little bird somewhere over there, um, some seagulls behind you in a distance. And these small changes makes you aware and increases your awareness as an audience. So the moment you start moving with your camera, you are not aware anymore of small changes and small subtle things that happen. So then I discussed this with my camera crew, and I decided that the camera is not going to move. There are no nice dolly shots, there are no zoom shots, there are no focus changes. The camera does not move, and the camera stays there on a tripod. Um, and there will be no nice drone shots. Every film today uses drone shots. And for me, then every time you create a distance with your subject, there's no reason to use a drone shot. You can see and experience everything from the position of the viewer on the ground. So I discussed it with my camera team. We decided the camera is not going to move, so you can experience the really subtle things that happen around you. So where do you end then? So the camera is not moving. We don't use any narration. We don't use any interviews. We don't use any traditional composed music. What happens then? So you think this is really dull. You think nothing really happens, but then this way of observation, and it's almost a sort of humble way of observing, and I believe this makes the viewer extra conscious of the really subtle things that happen around us.
Okay, thank you so much for your answering. I think it's really, really remarkable answer. And as I mentioned in the question sheet, I'm so impressed by your previous work, because after I watched this one, I did quite a lot of research about your previous work. And actually you talk about the observational method just now. And also I really agree with you, like the using of the camera. So I just wondering, like the technical things you use in this film. You use the 4 frames, 6K Cine Auto Venice camera in this film, which is quite high quality, the high technique. Did you decide to use this camera before you make the shooting, or when you visit Wadensee, you think, oh, this is amazing, this is beautiful, I must use this high quality camera to record these remarkable things?
The technique, my fascination is about technique. I'm really fascinated about what you can do with technique. Technique should serve you as a filmmaker. And during the years, I truly believe that resolution of cameras and what you can do with cameras has an enormous impact on the way you tell your story. And for me, it goes back to where I started filmmaking. And at the end of the 1970s, I started as a cameraman for the cinema newsreel. At that time, we still had the cinema newsreels. And we always shot everything on 35mm traditional analog film. And what I found so interesting, that what I was shooting during the weeks, every week I went to the cinema and I was confronted with my own work. So all the footage that I shot, all the subjects that I covered, I experienced this on the big screen. And at that moment, the big screen and the magic of cinema became my main fascination in filmmaking. I believe when you enter a cinema and you experience what happens on a huge screen, the lights go out, your cell phone is not allowed to use. You don't hear the sound of your coffee machine back in your kitchen. You are transformed into another world, the world of cinema. And it's dark around you and you are only sensitive of the magic and the effect of sound and images on this huge screen. And if you handle your technique in a proper way, then the magic of cinema appears, and the magic of cinema brings you in another world, and in a world you did not experience yet. So this magic of cinema for me is really important. But to create this magic, you should be really aware and you should be really able to handle all the technical aspects of filmmaking. So that's why I think, as a filmmaker, and for me, I see myself as a large screen filmmaker. My fascination is for the large screen, to create and to bring the audience something on the large screen. All the technical aspects should be handled and should be understood properly by the filmmaker, because everything is enlarged and every sound detail becomes huge and every detail in the images become huge. So you have to be really well able to use all the technical aspects. And for my films, I think all my films go back to the phenomenon of observation and the purest ways of observation. I come back to that later. And when you talk about observation, when you talk about small detail, when you talk about really wide shots, when you talk about color space, when you talk about focus, when you talk about attention, this has everything to do with handling your technique in a proper way. And I compare my way of filmmaking. When you look into photography, there is something we call large screen photography, large format photography. And I like to create my films in a large format photography sort of approach. That there should be a lot of care and a lot of attention in the way you handle your images, you present your images, you create your images. And again, if you do that in a proper way, it will have this magical effect on the viewer. For instance, if you do a film on a political subject or social important subjects, this image quality is less important. But that's not the sort of subjects my experience is about. So this magic of observation, and for me this goes back to the Dutch visual culture. Some people believe that the Dutch have only one developed sense, and that is the eye. The Dutch are not great writers. We are not great composers. The Dutch kitchen is not really interesting and not to be compared, for instance, to the French or the Italian or the Chinese kitchen. You could say that we have only one developed sense. And that goes back to the 17th century, I believe. If you look at the history of the Netherlands, and when you go back to the 7th century, in the 7th century, both scientists and artists were obsessed by observation. And this observation was about observing things in detail and observing things in large. We had scientists like Huygens who mapped the universe for the first time. We had scientists like Van Leeuwenhoek who invented the microscope and observed things in detail, things in small. The Dutch painters, they reproduced this reality, and they did this in a sort of humble way, and both artists and both scientists were obsessed with observation. And so this Dutch visual culture goes back to the 17th century and started in the 17th century and developed all the centuries later on. And my fascination for observation, and you can also see this in my previous film, Dutch Light, and later on also, of course, in Silence of the Tides, my fascination is similar, like the fascination of the Dutch 17th century landscape artist who invented the clouds and who invented the way the light behaved in our surroundings. And they almost reproduced this in a very detailed way. They did not add any emotion. They did not add any storyline. They did not add any taste or different feeling. It was almost a sort of humble observation and translation of reality. Now, my fascination for observation is completely inspired but in what happened in the 17th century. Now, if we go back to our way of observation and filmmaking today, this is my solid base. And my solid base is, well, it's really about a very detailed and highly sensitive and really radical way of observing my subjects. And then if you look at my documentary Dutch Light, in the documentary we researched the question whether this famous Dutch light everybody was talking and writing about for centuries, and artists from all over the world and philosophers and writers came to visit the Netherlands during the 18th and 19th century, 20th century, to see this magic light for themselves. But nobody had ever investigated whether this famous light was a phenomenon or really was something which was really there. And in this film, we are dealing with this light. And for me, one of the magics of cinema is light. And then especially what happens in the Netherlands is that in the Netherlands, the light is constantly changing during the day. So this constantly changing of light makes us aware and makes us sensitive for observing and experiencing what happens around us. So this changing light and the function of light and the way, the effect of the light on the landscape, and also the effect of the light, which is constantly changing on our mood, plays an important role in my films.
Okay, this film, Silence of the Tide, is quite different from your previous work, and this is a real film which born for the big screen, and it's also the first Dolby Atmos production in the Netherlands, which allows the audience to experience the incredible sound in the cinema. So when we introduced this film, we said you must sit in the cinema to enjoy this incredible experience. However, currently this is a UGC age, like everyone can be the content generator. They use the TikTok and the YouTube channel to post their daily life and call them as documentary. And they don't want to spend time to sit down in the cinema to see documentary. They prefer to use their mobile phone and refresh their TikTok application to see those short doc. And for you, as a filmmaker, what do you think about this phenomena?
I'm always open and really interested in new developments. But then on the other hand, if you believe you can see a film on an iPhone, if you believe you can see a film on a laptop, if you even believe you can see and experience a film on a television screen, you are completely wrong. Because you can't see and you don't see and you don't experience anything. So if you look at TikTok, I believe it's really interesting what happens, but it doesn't have anything to do with a magical experience, because I believe the way we handle our images and sounds, the content of our images disappear. It's only moving images and moving sound, but the images lose our content in the way we present and look and watch and handle moving images in these new ways of presenting. Although it's really interesting, and although it keeps you busy a whole day, experiencing the world on your small mobile phone, if you are in the middle of a city or a restaurant or a train or a bus, 90% of the people is focused on such a small image on their mobile phone, and they think they experience something, but then in reality they don't experience anything. What do we experience on such a small image with sounds that are distorted? There's nothing. It's like dust. It appears there and it's gone like dust, and it leaves nothing in your mind. It leaves nothing in your soul. It's nothing anymore. So for me as a filmmaker, I do not believe I'm going to use TikTok. I truly believe in what you can experience in a theater. The lights go out, you leave your telephones back home, you leave your life, you're going to experience something magical. And if you see a good film in cinema, it keeps on buzzing for days in your mind. It can change your life. It can change your way and your respect for why we are living, what we are doing. So I keep on filmmaking for a large screen, and I use the telephone to call my friends to go to the movie.
Okay, thank you so much for your answering. And as you mentioned in your previous interview, you hope people can enjoy this film in cinema instead of YouTube or DVD or VOD. And also you talk about TikTok. How do you think the post-COVID age has affected your creative approach? For example, like the script selection or the story direction, because of the COVID, people, the organization, they canceled a lot of offline film festival like Cannes Film Festival, Berlin Film Festival, and they put the screening link online, and those prize or industry people, they have to watch those films online. The small screen, not the big screen. Such a pity. But for you, filmmaker, is there any changes due to this special period?
But to be honest, I believe that our COVID area is a temporarily situation. And I believe in the future, and maybe even in the near or a very near future, then this whole COVID period is something of the past. And we can go back to real and normal life. I'm sure about that. What happened during, and I find that particularly interesting, I think what happened worldwide during the COVID era, it brought us back to ourselves. We had to stay home for a longer time. We were not allowed to go outside for a long time. We became more and more aware how precious life is and how fragile the relation between man and nature is. So I think this whole COVID area has a positive message and has a positive effect on human being. As I said, it makes us more conscious of life. It makes us more conscious of relations between ourselves and our family, people around, our relation with nature, and how sensitive it is. And if you look at a film like Silence of the Tides, that at this moment, watching the film Silence of the Tides is a much more dramatic experience as it was 2 years ago before the COVID era, because this film is all about the fragile relationship about us and nature. And during this COVID era and after this COVID period, seeing a film like Silence of the Tides is really impactful and really has an impact, dramatic impact of the viewer, and makes us feel everything about the way we are fragile. And then again, we try to watch our films back home, but we really miss the effect of a large screen. We really miss the effect to be together in a huge theater and experience something. But then again, I think we are dealing with a temporarily situation, and I believe that in the near future, we will go back to the theater again. We will go back, experience films on a big screen, because that's where the magic happens.
Okay, absolutely right. I totally agree with you. Like, this is a positive sign for us, and we do have time to reconsider our daily life and the probably like environment protection, things like that. Think about the society, think about political issues, things like that. So the final question is about your upcoming work. And as I know, you're developing a new documentary called Cloud Busting, which is a tribute to clouds and also designed for the big screen, similar like Silence of the Tides. Could you please share your inspiration of this project with the audience?
Yeah, a new film I am working on, and I'm still in the developing and writing, researching stage. And the negative part, due to COVID, I was not able to travel and do research, international research, but then so be it, waiting for the future. My new film is called Cloud Busting and goes back to my fascination for the cloud. And cloud busting will be my tribute to the phenomenon of clouds. Clouds can be really poetic. Clouds can make you happy. Clouds can make you sad. But clouds can also make you really scared. If you look at the yearly supercells, for instance, in the countryside in the United States of America, you see the enormous storms and the power of nature created by this huge cloud constructions we call supercells. So cloud busting for me goes back to the essence of observation. In my film, the documentary Dutch Light, I used the horizon low in the framing. In Silence of the Tides, we raised the horizon to have the effect of the mud flats all around you. And I believe in my film Cloud Busting, the horizon is gone and my view will be a three-dimensional view around. And it will be an international film. It will be about all the subtle things about clouds, but most important, I'm investigating the relationship between clouds and climate change. And that's quite an interesting subject, because as we know, the rising water we can easily measure. If you pull up a centimeter in the water every day and you make your note every day, you can put it in a nice graphical thing. If you take the temperatures every day around the world, things are really clear what happens during the decades. But then when you come to clouds, it's almost impossible to do a proper measurement of clouds. Even there are a lot of scientists worldwide trying to capture what the effect of clouds is to the weather. Every time we are wrong, even with the most complicated computer models. Scientists are not well able to understand the effect of clouds to the weather. And then my film is not only about the relationship between the effect of clouds and climate change, but also about the human cloud, which is called the homogenitus. And these are the clouds from trails from airplanes. And we're talking about the clouds coming into the air from our industry. So we as a human being are also responsible for creating clouds all around this. And I'm fascinated about the effect of that on our environment. And I'm fascinated about the effect of this human cloud on the subject of climate change. So these will be the elements I am investigating, and I'm trying to develop for my new film. And I even hope that it will bring me to China, because what happens around the world and what also happens in China in relation to our weather and our climate, I find highly interesting.
Cool. That's all from me today, but I have one more question. Like, you are a really good documentary director and acclaimed director. Could you please say something to encourage the young generation filmmaker, because they're facing like confusing time and during the production. So, and I have to share good news for you. The film Silence of the Tides had really good box office results during this screening, and so could you please just say something to encourage them?
I'm really happy to hear that there is a audience in China, and I really hope there will be a huge international audience, and especially in China, such a huge country and many people. I'm really flattered that people are able to see and find the film interesting. So I think I'm convinced that I am talking in an international cinematic language, which is understood in China as well. And then, do I have a message for young filmmakers? Well, I am truly convinced that filmmaking starts with doing your homework. Filmmaking starts with doing a lot of research, doing a lot of reading, doing a lot of investigating. You really should understand the history of filmmaking. You really should understand what all technical possibilities offer you. And it's like riding a bicycle. You should not think about how to ride your bicycle when you're riding your bicycle. It should be an automatic thing. Well, this is more or less the same with filmmaking. You really should be aware of all the possibilities. You really should understand your equipment before you start filmmaking. Because if you do so, and if you approach filmmaking in a way with a solid background, at the moment you do your films, you are able to be inspired, and you are able to create really great things.
Good. Thank you so much.
We have a special gift for you today, actually. My colleague Yali will guide you to see our rehearsal for tomorrow's opening ceremony.
Yeah.
Nice.
To see the Simba.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. It's really great. It's really great having this film and also having you as our interview. We're really sorry that due to the pandemic and also the travel limit, we cannot have you right here to see the audience. But outside this interview room, they are doing the rehearsal for the opening ceremony tomorrow. And if you don't mind, if you have about 5 minutes more, we would like to show a little bit of the atmosphere.
Okay. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I would love so. Yeah.
During the way there are maybe a few minutes that the internet cut off, but soon it will come back soon.
Okay, that's fine.
Sorry, I didn't know they already finished the rehearsal. The film already started. Sorry, we will make a video about the how it looks like tomorrow, and probably we can connect tomorrow with you after the screening.
Wonderful. Sounds
Thank you
really
so
good.
much. Thank you so
It
much
was my
for
pleasure. My
Sorry,
sincere pleasure.
sorry.
Have a nice day.
Have a great day. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. 好，他走。
走，你怎么不吃？